Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
This workshop is designed primarily for 2 or more people to work together and to go through every one of the 12 steps. One person will act as narrator and read the text in black font. The other will read the red text, which is directly copied from our big book. I have been using this method for over 21 years. I have found it useful and rewarding. I hope you will too. Yours in fellowship and service.
Although we are all aware that we are talking about alcoholism and alcoholics, it doesn't harm us to refresh our minds on what these 2 words actually define. Therefore, I have prepared the following text taken directly from the Oxford Dictionary. Please read what it says.
Session 2. Welcome to session number 2, in which we shall read and discuss this step in depth. As in the previous session, the narrator reads the black text and the other person shall read the red text. Let's start with a brief review of what we have learned so far. In the 3rd paragraph on page 64 of the Big Book, we find an excellent overview of the recovery process. The Big Book authors write,
"For we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically.
This is our goal. To correct the spiritual malady that has separated us from God and has doomed us, till now, to the living hell of alcoholism. If we are spiritually sick, how do we overcome this malady? The authors tell us that we need to experience a psychic change, a spiritual awakening. Dr. Silkworth describes the effect of this change on the alcoholic in the 1st paragraph in Roman numerals page 27. XXVII. Dr. Silkworth writes,
On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that he is required to follow a few simple rules.
What are these simple rules? Boiled down, they amount to 6 words only. Trust God. Clean house. Help others. If we follow these simple suggestions, we shall receive the ultimate reward, which is a spiritual awakening or experience, the definition of which is a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. In the first session, we started our journey to this spiritual awakening by taking step 1. We were conceding to ourselves that we had become powerless over alcohol, that our lives were unmanageable. In other words, we have admitted we were alcoholics. Step 2. Came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral, we could wish to be philosophically comforted, in fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed willpower wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient, they failed utterly.
What is it going to take for us to find this power? The answer is in the back of the Big Book. Starting with the 2nd paragraph on page 570, we find,
Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery. But these are indispensable.
Bill W., one of our co-founders, had a great deal of difficulty in accepting this spiritual solution to alcoholism. In Bill's story, he describes how he came to believe. In late November of 1934, W.D.B visits Bill at his Brooklyn home in New York. It is during that visit that Bill learns about a God of his own understanding. Let's pick up the story on the first paragraph of page 12. As we mentioned in the first session, W.D.B is one of Bill's former high school friends and former drinking companion. W.D.B has been sober in the Oxford group for 2 months. He tells Bill his life has changed as the result of practicing the Oxford group, 4 special activities, as he called them: surrender, sharing, restitution, guidance. These were later to become the foundation stones for AA's 12 steps. Bill became quite distressed when W.D.B starts talking about God. However, he does listen because he realizes W.D.B's life has changed so much. He is sober for the first time in many years.
Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused in me a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his way might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way.
Then W.D.B presents Bill with a revolutionary concept.
My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would.
This is how Bill started on his spiritual journey to a God of his own understanding and lasting sobriety. It all began with Bill's willingness to believe. Now let's look at how the Big Book authors describe God. In the middle of page 46 they ask us to set aside any contempt we might have for spiritual principles and consider our own concept of God. If we do this, we might begin to realize that there just might be some validity to the AA spiritual solution to the problem of alcoholism. Starting with the third line of the first paragraph of page 46 they write,
"We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God."
Basically, the Big Book authors tell us that it is impossible to define God. We have to stop trying to comprehend God with our minds and start accepting God with our heart. In the first paragraph on page 47 they explain to us that,
"When, therefore, we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies, too, to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. At the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to effect our first conscious relation with God as we understood Him. Afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth, but if we wished to grow we had to begin somewhere. So we used our conception, however limited it was.
Sometimes we have to take our lives right back to the brink of disaster and look death squarely in the eye before we are willing to acknowledge the presence of God. But there is hope even for the most stubborn of us. Starting with the 7th line down from the top of page 48, the Big Book authors state that most of us eventually become teachable.
Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were.
In the third paragraph on page 52, the authors make a powerful case for the existence of God.
When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work. But the God idea did.
Once again we need to make a decision. We have to decide whether or not we believe in a creator, a spirit of the universe, a God of our own understanding. In the second paragraph on page 53, the Big Book authors write,
"When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is, or he isn't. What was our choice to be?
Now is the time to choose. Are we willing to concede there is a power greater than ourselves? The second step question therefore is, do I now believe, or am I willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? If we answer yes, then we have completed step 2. So, steps 1 and 2 are acceptance steps. To do them you simply have to believe them and accept what these steps say. We must remember that insanity for an alcoholic is defined as someone who takes a drink knowing what will happen to him or her. So the insanity referred to in step 2 is the state of mind preceding the first drink, not the insane behavior afterwards. Let's reflect a moment on steps 1 and 2 before going further. Both of these are acceptance steps. They are not working steps. The working steps begin with step 3 and continue through to step 12. On page 62 and 63 of the Big Book, the authors show us how to become God-directed rather than self-directed. But they first describe how operating on a self-will basis has kept us and will continue to keep us separated from our higher power. On page 60 they explain that when we live on self-will, we are like actors trying to control every detail of the play.
The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on a self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who tried to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way.
This brings us to the end of session 2. We are now beginning to have a clear idea of why the 12 steps are vital in recovery and how to practice these healing principles in all our affairs. Each of these sessions was originally adapted for the Back to Basics meeting of the Ray of Hope group in Kuwait back in 2002. The aim is to provide clear-cut directions on how to recover from the disease of alcoholism. It has been demonstrated time and time again that the Back to Basics method is very effective if followed and practiced to the best of our ability. Please feel free to pass on to others these documents if you think it will be of help. We have to give our sobriety to others in order to keep it for ourselves.